Working from home is set to stay for the foreseeable future as Singapore gets ready to progressively reopen its economy. It'll be among a suite of measures for companies to ensure safe working environments, even beyond the circuit breaker period. Trade and Industry Minister Chan Chun Sing has said this in an interview that also touched on other levers of the economy.
Singapore has mostly kept companies in the biopharma, petrochemical and manufacturing sectors open as these are plugged into global supply chains. Essential workers in these sectors are among the 17% of the workforce still operating on-site. For the rest, the government expects those who can work from home to continue to do so beyond the circuit breaker as staff get used to new ways to communicate and do their work. It'll be part of what's called safe cohorting, measures that split employees in terms of shifts, work sites or outside interaction. The key, said Mr. Chan, is that operations are sustainable.
Our working assumption beyond the circuit breaker measure must be this, that we continue to need to maintain our vigilance, because if there's any lapse in our focus, then we might risk a relapse of the situation or a flare-up. And if so, we must have measures to be able to detect them quickly and contain the situation.
While the priority is to restart companies in manufacturing and production with proper safe distancing, Mr. Chan said the government is looking at help schemes for those that will reopen later as part of a review of its support. Singapore's economy is expected to be hit hard by the coronavirus, with full-year GDP expected at between -4% and -1%. When asked for his projection, Mr. Chan said the situation is fluid.
What we are most concerned is to make sure that the package of help schemes that we have is delivered and well executed on the ground. And that remains our focus at this point in time. So I will not give any specific number at this point in time, but suffice to say that we are making sure that whatever measures we have rolled out from the budget schemes will continue to make sure that they are well executed.
The tourism and aviation segments have been among the biggest victims of the pandemic, and Mr. Chan said the focus is now to target essential travel to boost confidence. He expects regional tourism to kickstart the wider revival of the sector.
But in order for us to market ASEAN as an integrated package, we also need to make sure that we have the same common health standard, cross-border health declarations and checks in order for us to resume the cross-border travels.
Singapore, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, South Korea and Japan are also in discussions to resume essential business travel. Mr. Chan said the countries are preparing the groundwork to coordinate standards and checks.
Mr. Chan also says the signing of the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership is on track to be signed by year's end, despite the pandemic. He says the timeline will hold even if India, which has been re-invited to discussions, does not join. Mr. Chan says the mega free trade agreement is important for the global economy to bounce back.
Everyone agrees that it is very important for us to sign the RCEP this year to bolster the confidence of the global economy and the regional economy, especially in such a difficult moment. So when I talk to my various counterparts, I think they all realize that we need to do two things. We need to not just manage the current situation, which is the fallout from the COVID-19 pandemic, but we also need to give confidence for the longer term economic prospect for our regional countries. And we need to do new things to allow our economies to recover and to grow.
Meanwhile, 657 new COVID-19 cases have been reported here, taking the national total past 18,000. The Health Ministry says most are migrant workers living in dormitories. 10 are Singaporeans or permanent residents. MOH says the number of cases among migrant workers has been fluctuating in recent days due to a clearance of backlogged cases by one laboratory. It's working with the lab to stabilize operations. Now, issues surrounding the COVID-19 pandemic will be in focus when Parliament sits tomorrow. Specifically, 8 MPs will ask about foreign worker dormitories where infections continue to surge. The bulk of today's new cases are from among this group.
Inside the four walls of these dormitories, building codes dictate that each foreign worker must get at least 4.5 square meters of living space. But with the swell of infections in these types of quarters, one MP is pushing for conditions to be improved.
And if you really break it down, it's about 2.1 meters by 2.1 meters. And so for some of the workers, it's going to be quite hard to practice safe distancing. And I think moving forward, to be able to beat this pandemic and to maybe prevent or even beat future outbreaks, then we really have to look into this gross floor area provided to each worker.
The 4.5 square meters also include living and dining areas, as well as toilets. Mr. Ng's asking if these can be counted separately. He's also proposing that existing laws governing safety and hygiene in dorms that house over 1,000 workers be extended to smaller living quarters.
I'm asking for one standard guideline to cover all dormitories and to make sure that the worker has the same basic living rights, living condition and rights. Again, irrespective of where he or she lives. I think MOM, all the agencies, the NGOs are out there are really working very hard to fight this outbreak. If we can make sure that every worker, migrant worker in Singapore can practice good, safe distancing, then again, it's a very big step forward in fighting this pandemic.
Separate from regulations that are supposed to ensure adequate living conditions, a nominated MP is looking for answers on why and how the outbreaks happened. He's proposing a committee of inquiry.
The amount of public resources we're putting in to make sure that people are safe and sound is I think, second to none. So it's nothing to do with second-guessing what's happening right now. It's really taking a step back after the present emergency is dealt with, contained, and asking how did this occur? Were there any lapses? Were there any areas which didn't quite work out as planned? And I think quite importantly, is there any accountability here that we can identify?
Associate Professor Tessera also emphasizes that the search for accountability must not simply be what he called a backwards-looking exercise, but one that ensures such crises don't happen again.
More GCE subjects will have their assessment tasks reduced. That's in light of the shift to full home-based learning and adjustments to school holidays amid the coronavirus pandemic. The Singapore Examinations and Assessment Board told us this will now apply to 12 out of 34 subjects with a coursework component. That's up from just 2 previously.
Harshan Koban is one of about 360 students taking exercise and sports science for the O-levels this year. He's doing hockey and cross-country, which was supposed to account for 60% of his grade. But now he can pick just one sport to count towards these marks.
It's given us more time to focus on training for that particular sport. First, the circuit breaker, so we had to stay at home and do our own fitness. It may not exactly be the same environment as what we assess on.
His teacher says it hasn't been easy keeping up with the practical components during this period. This includes logging their training plan, which came to a standstill as it requires strict teacher supervision and can't be done at all during home-based learning. They've been given a 2-week extension to the submission deadline. But with competition suspended and students staying away from school for almost 2 months, the fear is the aspiring sportsmen who won't be at their peak when classes resume.
It's not about doing that 100 meter just one time. It's about training for it, and then for us to be able to at least give them 2 to 3 times of assessment. We want to make sure that they are assessed when they are at their best physical state. So I hope we can give them about 3 weeks or so to get back to the groove lah.
The exam board will also consider timings and footage recorded as far back as last year, which the school is helping students to collate. About a third of coursework subjects will see a reduction in assessment tasks. These include food and nutrition, design and technology, and drama. The exam board says when making its decision, it considered if students needed access to special facilities or had to perform in groups, like for drama. Over at St. Margaret's Secondary, the 12 students taking O-level drama will now perform only an individual piece, instead of also having to stage an original work together.
My students have actually finished writing their script. It's fine, as I explained to them, the learning is not lost despite its removal. I'm personally also quite relieved that the group device piece has been removed because this will mean that the students can focus on analyzing the pre-release text.
Students are now watching videos like this at home to keep up with their learning, though it's not quite the same.
When we are having lessons together in school, she can better assess our voice projection and help us explore different gestures and facial expressions. Since we are spending such a long time away from school, our progress has been hindered.
But the show must go on, so schools will allow graduating cohorts to come back early to resume face-to-face coaching from 19 May.